Coming up next is a panel called Does Media Matter? Storytelling in Real Life versus in XR. I'd like to welcome Emily Ullman, Amy Jupiter, Kathleen Cohen, and Eve Weston to the stage.
Thanks, Ray. Clicker. Let me just grab that.
Are we on? Can you hear
We
me?
are on. Hey, everybody.
Can you hear me?
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. All right. And so we have Eve. Okay, so wonderful.
Hey.
So I'm so glad that you're all here. I did a quick poll of the audience to see who's here in the room, and it turns out we have a good mix. But we have students, we have experienced designers, we have people in construction. Yeah, so furniture, I mean, gosh, folks trying to,
People.
yeah, storytellers, right? So that's why we're here for this talk, Does Media Matter? Storytelling in Real Life versus XR. I'm Emily Ullman, and I'm the CEO of Hopscotch Interactive. I am based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I've been doing real estate, VR, XR, real estate photography and marketing for many years. And this is actually near and dear to my heart, storytelling in real life, because in the built world and with our marketing, we're trying to figure out how do we tell better stories, right? How do we do this? And I've also been to AWE. This is my 9th AWE, and I'm on the AWE Advisory Council, and I am also the community chair of what is the IRL Awards, a global award for excellence in VR, XR, AR for the location-based entertainment, for entertainment, and well, we are going to be talking about stuff now and here today on the panel that was inspired by what we did earlier this year by having a conference, the IRL conference, which happened early in 2021, that actually was in XR and also in real life. So that sort of kicked off this, this opportunity for us to all share what we do and what we bring our passions to every day in our work. So let's see here. So anyway, this conference is going to be happening in January, and Aurea over the years has been establishing global themes in XR, and the theme for this year is the passageway to a new human experience. Calls for submissions have just opened, so if you want to nominate somebody this year, we're actually going to be going through the community. So there's a couple of us, so Kathleen and I on the panel are going to be able to nominate folks, so chat with us. We have winners here in the audience. Neil's from Hollow Ride, so it's very great. It's great
Neil's
to,
from Hollow Ride.
yeah. So we've got a really big, amazing community to join. So what a better passageway than to deliberate if in real life versus XR is the same overall experience. So that is Kathleen's chance to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody.
So.
Can you hear me on the mic? Okay, because it doesn't sound like you can hear me. Anyway, it's been a journey this year, and I feel super blessed to be out and among meeting people face to face. I think we're all sitting in a moment where we all can shine, because now the world finally is like, oh, that's what you do, right? Finally. And I think everybody here has that shared moment, like, oh, everybody knows the word virtual. But it's not just virtual conferences. It's what we've been doing for 25, 30 years in our careers. So I feel super blessed to see people face to face. But yes, I am the jury chair and have been a keynote speaker for the Aurea Awards. And this conversation in real life or XR has come up this year. And I even coined a phrase, the tribrid moment, which is we're sitting not just in a physical and virtual, but we're sitting in a digital world too. And that's very different, and they answer to really different masters. So my dear colleagues, all three here, I have mad respect for. And I'm sort of the reason everybody is sitting up here, because I was like, wait a second, Amy, tell me what you do at Imagineering all these years in the brick and mortar world. Can we pull some of that genius into what we do in this immersive world? Eve, you created a classification and a taxonomy around this. Who has done that yet? And are we using this classification and taxonomy without knowing that we're standing on the shoulders of giants? Emily, you're in the real world every single day doing this translation of work. So I was like, let's have a talk about this. Let's talk about, does medium matter? Amy and I banter a lot. Every time I say, it's this, Amy's like, it's definitely not that. Every time I say to Eve, but what about this? She's like, let me understand this because there's a framework for that. So I feel a little bit like, okay, can I do something for the audience and give tools back to people that really explain, is it in real life or is it XR? What model are we really following? So that's all how this came to be. So you have the clicker, right?
I do,
So you
clicker.
Yeah, so this is just a bit about me. I'm an analog person. I was a happy glass blower, really, before I got on the box as an animator. And I actually just keep wanting to get back to it. 25 years, I'm like, can we just get through the screen? I didn't know once I got into animation, which was SGI, Silicon Studios, way back in the day, if I was going to be in a dark, glowing room at Sony for the rest of my life, being a rotoscoper or rotospliner. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I actually need to like shift gears. Maybe I'll ditch my creativity and be a producer so I can travel the world. Anyway, so from that right side of the screen is 25 years. And the key moments are glassblower to animation to now being on the Medal of Honor team PSX. And what just happened in my life? I don't even understand the conflation that just happened. So that small down there little box represents a lot of years of media and entertainment, and opened my own consultancy to really focus on location-based themed attractions. And it was a moment at Disney where we got asked to re-architect Epcot with new technology. And it was in that moment that I thought, oh my gosh, I can ditch a screen and I actually can now relate to the physical world in a way that I imagined so much and amplify it. So this whole right side got me back to experience design. And what we've revealed in this talk is that we're all sort of there too. So with that, I think we can move forward. That's my journey.
Okay.
Oh, actually, let me add one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Being part of the Array Awards on a global stage and inviting folks to participate has really, in this last year, pushed on this idea that we're coming out of what we just did online, and how do we still take those magic moments and bring it back to in real life as well? So I'm proud to be an advisory board on HoloRide's team, which came out of the Arrays, and have a voice in vehicle entertainment and real-time motion data as well. And that's all I wanted to add, is that we keep pushing on this combo. So with that.
Great stuff. Thank you,
Yeah.
Kathleen. Isn't she amazing? I'm just like, this is such an incredible panel. These people, these women are amazing. So I want to introduce Amy Jupiter, say a few words about her background, just so you all know all the incredible things she's done. She's a creative producer, experience architect, visual effects supervisor, and proprioceptive hacker, which we're going to learn about in a second. During her many years at Walt Disney Imagineering, Amy led teams developing and creating the next generation of award-winning immersive experiences and attractions for the Walt Disney theme parks, working her way up from intern to executive creative producer, executive visual effects supervisor, and experience designer for attractions in every corner of the Disney globe, literally Shanghai, you name it, all over the world. Now Amy and her company, By Jove, are currently working with Virgin Galactic as creative producers and experience architects. So that is Amy. And I want to introduce Eve Weston as well. Okay, Eve believes in storytelling as a force for positive change. Her VR art has shown at galleries nationwide, and she's a writer and director of the award-winning first 360 VR sitcom, The Business. She also starred in it. So Eve's speaking engagements as a VR storytelling expert include Stanford University, AWE, where she introduced the groundbreaking taxonomy for XR. We're going to hear about that. And also the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. Eve has taught 360 VR filmmaking for Emerson College in Los Angeles.
Oh, and I also currently teach at Los Angeles Film School and Chapman University. I teach XR storytelling there.
Yes, she's an amazing teacher. She's a professor for all of us. So she's also an award-winning journalist and has written about VR for Ms. Magazine and the New York Post. And for television, I love this part. Okay, so Eve has developed shows for ABC Family and Awesomeness TV, and written for ABC's Better With You and Disney's Wizards of Waverly Place, and among others. But for the latter, she wrote and choreographed the song Funky Hat Dance, which went viral and is now beloved by many kids all around the world. And so, anyway, we're not going to ask her to do it, but she could, I'm sure. So just a little bit of what's making this panel different today. I'm going to be asking Amy and Eve questions pertaining to their work. and how each of them believe their development process solves the definitions of immersive and experience. They're both going to have a chance to answer. We're probably going to go off script. And then Kathleen is going to weigh in on both of their answers to provide her point of view, sort of tying this all together. So Amy, I'm going to start with you. Could you tell us a bit about how you came to experience design?
Sure.
Next slide.
All right. So this is me at work, obviously on the planet of Pandora. How many people have been to Disneyland or Walt Disney World? Has anybody been to Pandora? All right. There you go, Chris.
Chris, of course.
All right. So, and this is also me at work, right? And see the Imagineer part. You know, I get a lot of questions. I was like, oh, I've always wanted to be an Imagineer. And I tell people that, you know, it's sort of a mindset. It's a way of life. And if you're asking that question, you're most likely an Imagineer already. And I think that it's accessible to all. And part of my sort of being able to say yes to some of these speaking engagements is about making that possibility accessible to other people, because it's, you can see that there are sort of three periods at the end of that sentence, because people say, I've always wanted to be an Imagineer, and then they get to Imagineering and they're like, oh, wow. If it's not the beginning of your paragraph, your life paragraph, because at least at Walt Disney Imagineering, which I'm going to actually just give you a little brief, if everybody, well, most people, everybody know what Walt Disney Imagineering is, what Enterprises? Right? Okay, cool. So I'm going to show you a little bit of the work that I've participated in. Not everything on this reel, because I had to borrow it. So here's a little bit of what they do. What happens. So as you can see, you know, a lot of real world experiences, but, you know, mostly like for me, I've been using a virtual production pipeline for my whole career. The idea of capturing spirit from real life, motion capture, performance capture, motion control, anything. My specialty sits inside of the using motion entities to drive emotion. My milestone is usually well, air conditioning. So where all the computers live is usually the place where I join the project. But the through line for both my current job at Virgin Galactic and at Imagineering, or being an Imagineer, actually starts with this. There's really no secret to our approach. We keep moving forward, opening up new doors and doing new things because we are curious. And curiosity keeps us moving down new paths. At WED, we call that Imagineering. The blending of creative imagination and technical know-how. And as I said before, it's being an Imagineer with the 3 dots. I've always wanted to be an Imagineer, ... because at Walt Disney Imagineering, and most places, even at the Spaceship Company or the Scale Composites, it's a lot of disciplines, right? It's integrated design. And we talk about all of those intentionally made things, and then we say this crazy thing. We make happiness. What does that even mean? So when I describe the last title that Emily said I carry is proprioceptive hacker. And really, I'm the big manipulator of your emotions and specializing in precortical response and then blossoming into your cortex so that you have an impression and then you take home a memory. And that it's way better than things we could ever afford. So that's sort of what I want to leave you with as the mystery of me.
Right? Wow, amazing.
Your turn.
Great, a device I haven't used before. Let's
We got this. We totally got this.
There you go.
Cool. So, let's see. I think this one is my question. So, Eve, do you want to walk us through your process? We just got Amy's process. And when you're creating an immersive story in XR, do you believe from your perspective that whether it is in real life or XR, the experience is the same? What can you teach us?
Oh gosh. Well, I've been practicing teaching for a while now, so probably a lot. So I would say that on the one hand, an experience is an experience, right? And so that I think that's true whether you're in a headset or at a theme park. But there may be some different affordances depending on the medium, and that's something that I think I knew instinctively, and then I developed the taxonomy that Kathleen mentioned, and that kind of helped lay it out a little bit more. So first in terms of tips for creating, I would say if you're creating an immersive experience, and again, that goes for real life or XR, put the viewer's experience first. I think people sometimes get really excited about the tech and what the tech can do, but at the end of the day, if you put the viewer's experience first, you will be in a much better place to have a successful experience. I gave an example to Kathleen the other day, where I think sometimes people learn about a 360 camera and they think, oh my God, I can film in all directions at once. And so immediately they're like, I'll put it in the middle of a circle, and a circle of people. And that, it's true, it can capture on all sides, but how many times in our everyday life do we spend time spinning in circles? Like, does that feel comfortable for us to constantly be looking around us? I've seen a lot of people think that it would be great to put on the edge of a stage so you can see the performer and the audience. But at the same time, like if you put the viewer's experience first, if you've gone to see a play or a stand-up comedy performance, what would it feel like to you standing on the edge of that stage? Everyone has different tastes, but I would feel a little awkward being in the face of the comedian and having the audience look at me. And so just little mental exercises like that, I think, can be really helpful in guiding your instincts. And that's with 360, but the same goes for if you're working in a game engine or if you're working in a theme park. It's that idea of putting the viewer's experience first. Another little bit of advice is embrace the fact that there are 360 degrees. I think especially people who are into film and television, we've gotten really used to this idea of the frame, and that's spread because now everyone has YouTube. Everyone's a filmmaker, right? All day we pick up our cameras and we shoot in the frame. And so it's only natural that has become habit. But the truth is, and some people think, oh, but we don't know how to tell stories in 360. Like, I would argue that. However old you are, that's how much experience you've had working in a 360 environment, because we've all grown up in the real world and there's stuff happening all around us at all times. And so it does take a conscious effort, though, after getting used to smartphones and cameras, to step back and think, okay, we have not just what's in this box, but we have the whole world at our disposal. And let's not look at that as a problem. Let's look at that as an opportunity. And I think that's sometimes where people new to this medium can get stuck, is they're like, oh no, how do I get the viewer to look where I want them to? And it's just think, oh my gosh, the viewer can look anywhere they want, and how do I guide them to have an experience that they would enjoy? And then the third bit of advice, I think, is use the tools that we're providing that are now available to you. So like Kathleen said, I created Taxonomy for immersive point of view and presented that at AWE 2 years ago. And basically, I know there's a slide later. Maybe I'll wait. How about this? I'll wait and I'll give you some. We'll build suspense. Yeah. So I'm going to go into the taxonomy a little bit more later, but get excited for it. And then actually, I see there's another slide, so I'll move forward. We'll see what happens. So this is a trailer for the business. So so this is the first 360 VR sitcom, and I applied a lot of those techniques I just talked about, and some other ones. But in this piece, so here, this will give you like a little sense of what it feels like.
What is this place? It's the business. It's a co-working facility. Oh, what goes on in there?
Affirmative. Tango Alpha Charlie.
I'm telling you, Mike is the anonymous pooper.
Attention, business.
I didn't find my underwear.
Are you watching porn?
You're USA! USA!
Take
That's why you asked me into the bathroom?
What happens in the business stays in the... Who am I kidding anyway? It's all over the internet. You can even see it in VR.
What were you achieving with the business, and what did you do with it?
Well, that's a great question. So really, when I came into VR, people were saying, we don't know how to tell stories in this space. And I even read Jeremy Bailenson book, which had come out at the beginning of the year that I was going to film the business. And he had talked to all these experts in storytelling and filmmaking, folks who worked with James Cameron and Spielberg, and they were saying, like, yeah, we don't really know how to tell stories in this space. And I'm like, I have an idea on how we could do it. And so I wanted to share that with people. And after describing it to some people close to me, I realized that the best way to share that vision was to make it so that people could put on a headset and see, here's a way to tell stories in XR. You know, XR, there are so many affordances that there are multiple ways to tell stories, but here's one successful way to tell stories. And so my choice was to bring the viewer into the world. You know, 3 questions I often ask when trying to figure out, you know, when I say put the viewer's experience first, it's like, well, why are we doing this in VR? And why is the viewer there? And then what do you want them to experience? And so for my project, what I answered is, you know, they're there because VR allows us to bring the viewer participant into the story, right? When I'm watching a sitcom on TV, I'm enjoying it, but I'm not in it. So my background is as a TV comedy writer, and I just thought that sounded like the most fun thing ever. I love being on set. I'm like, what if I could be in the show? So I wanted to create that experience for people, and VR allowed me to do that. So I wanted to show how you could put the viewer into the show. And then why are they there? Well, you know, everyone needs to decide for themselves when they're creating, but for me, my show is a workplace comedy that takes place in a co-working space where you, the viewer, are a member, right? And so it makes sense that you're there. You're a member of this co-working space, you're a character in the space, and to support that, I gave you work. I mean, not hard work, fun work, but I gave you a story, right? You have your own story in this world, and to me, that seemed really fun. And then what do you want the viewer to experience? And I wanted a heightened version of what you experience when you watch a sitcom on TV, right? You have fun, you feel like the characters are your friends, you want to spend more time with them. And so that was really my objective in doing this, yeah. And so Exolauno is my production company that produced the business. And the Look Club is something that I will talk a little bit more about later, that I use the taxonomy to jumpstart and build community around immersive narrative. And then those are the schools where I teach.
I will say this, what I love about what you have done with the Look Club, and I know you'll talk about it, is that you've done more user research in what you've accomplished with the Look Club and looking at so much content. And to be able to have access to you, to look at all of this content and distill it, you've gone out there and done this research. So when you talk about it, it'll make more sense. But that's what immediately I picked up on, is like you've actually been on the, you know, out there on the frontier collecting all the information, what everybody's done, and assessing it. So we'll pin that. So
Thank you.
Next.
Okay, who do I hand it to next?
I think Kathleen weighs in, but I will take over
So
the clicker.
I'm listening to both these amazing, you know, ladies talk about their backgrounds, and I think, you know, the backbone of the metaverse right now is games and game theory and game environments, and we're in that transition of moving away from it. And since I come from gaming and I saw back when the good, the bad, the indifferent, I thought, oh my gosh, am I going to be beholden to playing in this world with a rewards-based system that's going to make me level up every 5 minutes? I'm going to be that like bad Keiichi Matsuda video of hyper reality that we're all heading toward. Shoot me now. I have got to get ahead of this and start like asking for all the urban planners and the placemakers and the architects to get to the table right now. You're already too late. It's like UX designers in 2000. We were in test, and then all of a sudden people were like, maybe we should throw them in front of the client at first. Oh, good idea. So we can begin to, you know, architect this world. So I guess my question here is, Amy, you've talked to me about between here and 25 feet as an area that you design for or you think about. And what is that 25 feet in real life looking like as the first 25 feet in front of you in an immersive world? And are we carrying over these same development tools for what you've done to where you're headed? Am I going to use your taxonomy and design between me and 25 feet in a virtual world? So I kind of want to start with that. Like, can you riff on that? And I know you have plenty to say, so go. Say
Exactly.
It. Just, say it.
Should I,
You know,
do you want me to move to the next slide?
No,
Okay.
actually, not yet.
Okay.
I do want to talk about 25 feet because I think, as a mistress of illusion design, right? Everything that I have done is, up to this point, has been an illusion. And 25 feet, experience envelopes. It's the most expensive part in the theme park because it's got to be real. And so beyond that is usually media. And that's my superpower, is photons and the control of photons. And that is really the leap envelope of a large creature who can eat you. And so our survival techniques happen in our bodies are most aware, most surprised, most malleable, most tunnel visioned inside of a stress envelope. And we are really paying attention to whether it's eyeballs, a mouth, teeth, the things that tell you whether I'm happy at you or scared of you or gonna be, really be angry at you happen in these micro twitches, muscles right here and in the corner of your eye. And so what I love about the virtual world and also about, sort of film as a medium is that you can really zoom in on everything. But when you're in a large format film, there is no zooming. You have to carry the frame. If it's illusion and it's dimensionally composited, really all I'm doing is taking your basic film frame and dimensionalizing it and immersing you in it. And there are techniques, I think, for us when you talk about you're going to have a transformational experience, and I think that's the next slide. When we talk about experience design or experience architecture,
Go ahead.
And
you'll see that to get people to talk about it. So that focus at the top of the pyramid is either your transformational experience. In the case of Virgin Galactic, it's our apex experience, taking off, going to space. Not really talking about a line in space, but actually the experience of creating a crew and going to space. And then looking down and then challenging you to, now that you've seen this planet and how delicate it is and how thin that line is, and we're like really in the ignorosphere, right? The part that protects us from everything, but nobody knows a lot about, because if you're on your way to, sort of geosync, you're going through it. And we don't really talk about it. And so if that, by the time you get there, if you're coming to us for a multi-day experience to be ready to do that, I have to start way back in the left-hand corner, the left-hand corner of that triangle with awareness. How do I make you aware? Because I can't tell you you're going to have a transformational experience, and I can't tell you you're going to have purpose when you come home. But so all of that perceptual framing, sort of like Disneyland, like everything's about a frame. An architectural arch is a frame. The sort of triumphal arches that we all see from ancient culture have no other purpose but to make you actually walk through it, block your vision, so that when you walk out the other side, it's sort of disarming. And you see that castle, and you have, like, wow, aspiration. You tip up your chin, and you open your chest, and you breathe. We can't have you feel if you're not breathing. So things about your precortical, sort of neurobiology is, we're manipulating that. And you tip your chin up, your autonomic nervous system opens up, and you feel wonder and awe. And so all this perceptual framing. So by the time you get to that moment where, we want you to feel, we put you under stress, and we, especially, have anybody been on Flight of Passage? All right, so a 3-act structure, ride film. But by the time, you've never ridden a Banshee before, we're going to put you on the back of a Banshee. You haven't ridden it before. Basic 3-act structure in 4.5 minutes. How are we going to have you feel transformed? And we take you through a ritual, basically, a rite of passage. With the Virgin Galactic experience, we bring you in, we help you crew create, and by the time you get to that overview moment, we don't have to tell you a thing. You're going to the window to look out, right? And then, so empathy plus time equals compassion. So this experience, this precortical experience of physical stress plus time equals impression. So you have to have time to have an emotional resolution. And then you have a memory that you can share and tell everybody, but you can't actually describe the experience. You have to tell them that they have to do it. And so, so then it goes back to awareness, right? So this is really a whole sort of cycle. So the experience design of anything that I have participated in really contemplates this sort of articulation of going full circle.
And I think actually, Amy, it's the place without words, right?
Yes.
So I think that this is what you've explained to us as we were preparing for this, that you're getting people to the place without words, almost so that they can have all the words as well to tell everyone.
Words,
their words.
afterwards,
Well,
right.
well, but I'm going to constantly weigh in here and say, when people are, I'm going to throw it to you, but before we throw it to you, when you're walking around the theme park with AR glasses, or the whole environment knows you're there before you even walked into the environment, how are you going to behave? How is Disney going to create something like that? This is not for you to answer.
I know.
I know you're not going to, and nor be on the hook for it.
I know.
But I'm just saying, when we completely tip our perception, how is proprioceptive hacking going to behave? And with that, Eve, talk about your point of view when it comes to location-based entertainment or your taxonomy and how you look at your point of view from the viewer, from the guest, from the viewer first.
So one of the things I found was that a lot of this came very naturally and instinctively to me. And then when I had the opportunity to teach it, I needed to explain what I knew inherently to other people. And I wanted to talk with my students about existing content and let us analyze it and talk about what worked and what didn't work and the filmmaker's choices. And I also wanted to lay out for them a menu of options. So it wasn't just, oh, here's the technology and this is the first thought you have and you're going to make your experience that way because it's the first thing you thought of. Like, let's look at all the options and then choose. And as I was literally preparing a lesson, I was like, uh-oh, there aren't words for this. And so I was like, well, I've got a class to teach at the end of this week, so let me come up with some words for this. And I looked for where I could start. And so I realized we do have words for certain points of view. So for all of you who are paying attention in English class, you probably remember first, second, and third person point of view from books, right? You have, if a first person story is told with words like I, me, and my. You might remember a second person narrative from Choose Your Own Adventure books where it tells you what you're doing in the book. And then third person is a more distant, you can see what everyone in the world is doing from lots of different points of view. And we also have visual point of view. We have words to describe visual point of view, and we use that in movies. And probably the most common use is in video games, right? First-person shooter. Everyone knows what that means. So that was great, and that works well for existing media, books, movies, video games. But when we get to VR, there's more. There are more points of view. And so I was like, how do I articulate what these are? And so I realized that I needed to add on to those existing categories. And so I added two categories. One is called effectual point of view, and that deals with the impact that you, the viewer participant, have on the story or scene, right? So maybe if you're non-entity, it's like, I like to say you're an invisible fly on the wall. No one even knows you're there, and so therefore you don't have an impact on it. If you're entity, you are present, and people in the scene can see you and acknowledge you, and so just by virtue of you being there, you inherently have an effect on the space. And then participant is where you can actively participate, right? You can, in Beat Saber, you can slash boxes. If you're in a participant narrative, you can talk to characters and engage in the story that way. And then the other category that I added on is experiential point of view, which deals with how you can impact your own experience in an immersive environment. And that's really interesting because the most natural one for us to understand is moral, right? Which is we have control over our experience much like we do in the real world. We can kind of do things that are in line with the laws of the physical universe as we would behave in real life. Robot is a step back from that, where we don't have that normal level of control over our experience that we do in the real world. The filmmaker, we might feel like the filmmaker is forcing us to have an experience, right? If we're moving forward, but we're not doing anything to move ourselves forward, that's very unnatural. And then on the other side of it is deity, where we have more control over how we experience something than we do in our real lives here on Earth. A good example of that is that, in VR, you might be able to decide, I might be able to decide whether I want to experience this panel from my perspective, from Emily's perspective, or from your perspective in the audience. Right now, I can't do that. I can't go like this and be sitting in the seat and see what you see. But in VR, I could. And so that's an example of deity experiential point of view.
Wait, can I just say, Eve and I went to dinner, and she said in the future, we're going to be sitting down in VR, and we're going to be having dinner, and I'm going to order pasta bolognese, and you're going to be the one to taste it. And I was like, wait, I need to wrap my head around that one. So if that's where we're going,
it's
okay.
going to be possible. It's going to be possible. And this is, I will say, this is the abbreviated slide because it can be a lot to take in. But you'll notice that that vision is a sense, and we have some other senses. And so there's actually it builds out so that we can address the other points of view for our other senses. Mm-hmm. And then that little bracket on top is kind of a complicated concept, but it has to do with this whether we feel embodied or disembodied, and by that I don't mean whether or not you have an avatar, but I mean whether the visual and narrative points of view match. So sometimes there are experiences where there might be voiceover of a character talking in the first person, but it's not meant to be you. Then you see that person and it's like it doesn't quite match up, right? And there are others where you're clearly meant to be that character, and the visual and narrative points of view match, and that's embodied. That's a lot to think about, and there's we can get into that more another time. This talk is just to kind of go over it.
Yes, Ben, the Look Club was you looking at, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 pieces of content and being able to create this based on that. You had the user research. You were able to say, this comes from real life content creators who created environments. This just didn't come willy-nilly. So
right, yeah.
That's the piece that I saw in you was, oh my gosh, you have all the user research. You've actually distilled all this. So that's why I value this so much and say, where is this going to go?
And so to that point, so the Look Club, which Kathleen has kindly mentioned, is basically I wanted to make this accessible to more people. I also wanted to bring people together around immersive narrative. A lot of people don't know about this stuff, and you might say, oh, well, people don't talk about things they haven't seen or experienced, but that's not true. Like, people were talking about Hamilton on Broadway even if they hadn't seen it, right? And so it's just about getting the word out, and I think people will be really excited about immersive narrative once they know what it is. And so the Look Club was a way to try to get that out there and to get people who might not have access to a headset to understand what's in it, so they can decide whether they want to check it out or not. And the Look Club it's online at thelook.club. It's a searchable database of immersive narrative, and by immersive I mean everything that runs the gamut, right? From what Amy does to what I do. 2D screens, head-mounted devices, LBE, in real-world immersive theater performances, all of that counts. And so I wanted to examine pieces of content and sort of test the taxonomy and be like, just make sure, does it apply to all these things? And yeah, it does. And the other thing that I wanted to do is make it feel accessible to people, because new language can be hard to wrap your head around. I mean, I remember when I went to college, there was all this like slang that went around the campus, and you get there and people are like, oh yeah, and you're gonna call this that, and you're gonna call this, and I'm like, that just sounds stupid. I'm not gonna use those words. But then you hang around for a while and it's useful. It's useful, and you find yourself before you know it using that terminology. And so I wanted a place where people could hear this terminology being used and realize that it serves a purpose and it's valuable. So in addition to the searchable database, there's also a review show where we apply the taxonomy to existing content and use it to examine it and look at what filmmakers did look at the choices filmmakers made and where it worked to achieve their end and where it kind of fell short, which I think can be really enlightening to people who are looking to create in the space. Yeah, and it also kind of puts these terms in context and gives you examples, which I think is an easier way to understand it than just reading it on paper. You can actually
my goal is like combo package here.
Yeah.
Like what you put down and what you know inherently. Can we just get that in a format that I can just follow?
Right.
So that might lead into the
That might lead into the next slide. I
this is what we've achieved.
I just want to also say that people can check out your talk from AWE 2 years ago, which I highly recommend because she goes into deep, deep details on the taxonomy. Yeah. And can help people understand why their experience isn't working.
Yes.
So why is there a mismatch and what does that lead to? But let's talk about the now. Okay, so I feel like we might need to, we don't have as much time maybe as we would like to.
Well,
so
we had an epiphany yesterday where Amy was like, it's this. And Eve's like, it's this. And I'm like, what is this? And so this became that. And so I'm going to let either one of you defend why one of you is on that side and why the other is on this.
Actually, we weren't on either side.
We're the same.
We're just right, exactly. We violently agreed. And just to
they did actually, yeah.
we violently agreed because really perspective is really what you're talking about. And I always think about my medium and, you know, sort of the now that comes towards me in passive entertainment. And then I'm like, if I'm going in an active entertainment, I'm going to go curate my nows for myself. And then and that really led me to sort of those two directional arrows. And in a theme park, and you remember that slide about prefiguration or perceptual framing. So if you do your job well in any dimensional or non-dimensional environment, and you have an active participant, an active, you know, audience member, being able to curate wherever they look, hopefully, because remember, Disneyland was like an orange grove, and Walt Disney World was a swamp, as were many of, well, the others were an ocean and a swamp, and the marsh, right? So everything, we only do things where there's not, you know, reclaimed land. And so it really made sense to me that the only perspective was the way you came at the now, where the now either washed over you or you curated the now. But design, by definition, is intentional. I put things there intentionally. And so hopefully, even if I'm curating things, myself as an audience member or as an active media or in VR, everything I'm sort of looking at or being coaxed to focus on, because as a human being, I pay attention to the thing that's going to eat me or kill me. And so that choice, hopefully I've prefigured everything into that narratively. I've put things there for you to find that drive emotion. And really, you want to really have people feel, or at least I do. And whether it's scared or like, you know, a lot of things we fall back on superficial precortical like boo. But hopefully we're also sort of empathy with characters and narrative and traditional narrative for connectivity.
I'm just going to say, I see our time might be up, but I take what you're saying, and you can answer to your side of this if you want. But where I go, which I know you both probably hate, is Decentraland. Take that as an example. So how are we going to create and curate and have agency over a world that's a complete free-for-all? And is it just time right now? We're in the Wild West of it, but where's the ultimate experience going to be? Because we all love when we go to Disneyland. We do have happiness. We all love and understand what it is now to explore immersive. But when we go into these new territories that are all decentralized and we all have agency, so that's what this talk is going to be next year. So I'm just like cliffhanging that one. But if you want to finish and wrap your
just
side.
really fast. I mean, I think Amy said it well, and I think, Kathleen, I want to address what you said.
I know, so do I. I completely.
But I think the taxonomy came out of my desire to organize this, that what you call the Wild West. Like it's, you know, it's wild in a fun sense, but it doesn't have to be wild and like out of control, right? Like the taxonomy helps us break it down so that we can see what's there and make conscious choices. And everybody's going to be experiencing that world that you describe, but only some of us, well, at first, only some of us are going to be creating it, although frankly, people in this room are building amazing tools that are going to allow everyone to have a hand in shaping that future. But I do think that we want to understand what the choices we make when designing in that world, in that future world, what those choices mean. And I think that this language that I'm putting out there can help us to understand the choices that we make as experienced designers and content creators, so that we have a world that feels organized, not rigid, just like that guides you a little bit. You can still do whatever you want, but you have a sense of, you know, given what your interests are, where you might want to go. And Amy's talked a lot about that in her experiences about that idea of guiding, and that's something that I really lean heavily on in my work too, is we want you to have agency, but we also want you to feel taken care of. And I think, I think that's really important. And so maybe I'll just use that as a way to kind of to wrap up a little bit. But in terms of resources for places you can look for inspiration or guidance, I mentioned before the Look Club Review Show, which is on YouTube. I have some immersive story development tools that I'm coming out with, and so keep your eyes open for a book coming out next year. In the meantime, there's another book of mine that just came out. So if you're interested in storytelling in new and unexpected ways beyond the frame and beyond just film and TV, it's called 10 Kick-Ass Careers for Storytellers. It's available on Amazon now. So check that out. And
I think we're going to go to Q&A. Yeah, we're going to go to Q&A. So we want to, did we answer the question? I think everybody in the audience is probably, they have their own thoughts about this too. But let's take some questions from the audience. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Daphne. First of all, I want to be part of your friend group. I just.
Yes, we did it. We did it.
I just I'm can I give you my email? I just want to be friends with you all. But
Done.
So what I do is I make tech-based art, and I'm starting up a studio with my co-founder where we're doing this. So I'm particularly interested in experience design and really understanding how to guide the viewer through an experience and all of this. I'm a software engineer by background, and I just understand the difficulty of even onboarding someone into an AR or VR experience. You could lose them even in those first few seconds, right?
I'd like to respond to that when you're done.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll make my question fast. Yep. But really, my question was around as a visual artist and an engineer, what are kind of the best ways you think of basically helping me understand how I can continue to build out these immersive experiences for folks when I'm just working by myself as one person, right? So I don't have 50 or 100 people to sample my stuff. It's really just me. And does it make sense for me to use what works for me, or should I really try to focus on going beyond me and asking other folks? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. It does.
Kathleen, did you want to respond?
I'm on part one of your question.
Okay.
But you want to answer what Daphne just said?
Well, I love what you just said about, should you use yourself or go beyond? First, use yourself. That is you're human. and that's so valuable. So try it out on yourself and see if you feel comfortable and you like it. Because sometimes what you think up here might not match what you actually feel once you try it on. And then once you've gotten into a place where you as an audience member or a participant in your experience feel like you're enjoying it, then go ahead and test it on family and friends, right? You don't need necessarily a giant focus group or a whole studio.
Well, so this was part two.
Okay.
So I just came off of a 7-week art residency, and I was their first immersive artist. And I said yes to a place that just had a huge uptick in COVID. So I actually physically could never go to the residency that I was actually going to take part in. So I was like, well, we're immersive artists. This would be on trend. Okay, I'll be like Banksy. You guys will never see me, but I will be your immersive artist. And guess what? I'm not even going to recreate tech art or crypto art. I'm actually going to recreate the residency in the metaverse, so then we could bring people to the location, right?
She did it, too.
So we did, but I said I'm going to work with indigenous tribes and work with neurodiverse folks and bring these two communities together to explain and have a collaborative piece. Well, that was an epic fail in the having an art moment. It was an epic win in understanding not just DEI, but understanding humans at human scale and the reaching people where they're at. In the neurodiverse community, you're not going to get a neurodiverse artist to show up at 30 avatars and not feel like I don't really want to be here. I want to share my story in shapes and not in linear words in any way. In the indigenous tribes, it's about convening and being together and communicating to build trust before anybody even shows up, especially because that's not my community. So who am I to ask anybody to assimilate to my vision? So when this is part of answering your question, do I want to start with me? Yeah, start with you and recognize you quickly get met with meeting people where they're at, which is what just happened to me. So I'm in this moment of was that a good experience or not? It was an expansive one. So that's it.
Oh my God, seriously, can I be your friends?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Daphne.
Hi, thank you all for this talk. I think it was the most engaging and my favorite so far.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, you made my day.
I have a question for Eve, mainly, because you work with a lot of undergraduate students.
Yeah.
I'm designing a tool to kind of make 3D animation more accessible to young people who kind of come from Roblox or Minecraft, and maybe Blender is a little too much for them already. So I'm just curious to know what undergraduates are kind of thinking as it relates to immersive theater and performance and all these sorts of things.
Oh, that's a great question. That, at least the ones I'm teaching, they're really excited about it. It's pretty cool. Like I've got 8 students right now in my VRAR storytelling class, and they come from all different backgrounds. I think I've got a broadcast journalist, I've got a theater major, I've got a couple of VR minors, somebody who's in screenwriting. And it's really cool because even with all those different backgrounds, like they're all very interested in pushing this medium forward. And I do feel like something like that would be of value because they want to create in this space. And some of them have a greater level of technical skills and some of them don't yet. And I think as somebody who I love the arts, and I feel like the folks in the arts have a lot to bring to this space in a really positive way, and making it more accessible to them and allowing them to create without necessarily having to learn coding in Unity is really wonderful, and I think you're doing a service. I mean, it's always great. It's always great to learn new skills, but like I realized as I was coming into this space, a lot of the tech folks who were building these headsets, they want to figure out what to do with this tech, but they don't know they may not know how to tell stories. They certainly don't have like an MFA and like a decade of experience professionally telling stories, right? And I want to tell stories in this space, but I don't know how to build headsets and code, and neither of us should have to learn the other. It's always great to learn as much as you can to understand the other person's point of view and what they're doing and how it works, but it takes a lot of time and energy to become an expert in your field, and I think it's really important that we work together and recognize the value that each side brings, because together we can really create something amazing.
Yes.
Awesome. I think that's amazing. Thank you.
Good. Yeah.
One last question.
All right. Well, this is my standing ovation, standing here. This panel was super necessary and just felt so vital. I'm Caitlin Krause. I work with experience design. I'm an author, teacher too. And I'm designing for wonder and awe. And I noticed that, a lot of you brought up that word as some of your priorities. For me, I was just curious. I'm finding with things like the overview effect or empathy, there's kind of this paradox where somebody loses their attachment to their singular self. So they're on the journey sort of as this participant that is not just one I, one person. So I'm curious if you have a design consideration for a story that still has integrity, still leaves me as, Caitlin, myself, but takes me beyond the attachment to my singular experience. Thank you.
Amy?
Thank you.
That's a good question.
I mean, for me, the disarmament of self and the transcendence of self is part of any kind of crew creation. Is any kind of, you take people out of their comfort zones, but in a really supportive way. You have to really hear into what they bring to the equation. I mean, it's a dialogue. And I think that some of the creation of empathy and dissociation from individual, like we're taking a lot of high net worth individuals, and we want to mix, right? If we're gonna say space for good, space for all, democratization, I think you really have to be able to understand where the power dynamic is of teaching, training, vulnerability, and I think that part of experience design is a highly choreographed sort of de-individualization process, and so that you're looking at each other and looking to each other. And that does take a highly choreographed, obsessive repetition. Like a lot of what we do is about repetition and repetition, so that time starts to dilate, the actual physical spaces start to get bigger, so that you can see in between. because all of us, this wonder and awe. I mean, when we create wonder and awe, it's just really even almost about where you put the sweet spot. If I'm always going to want people to look up, right? We go up to look down. That really is about gesture towards looking up, and broadening the definitions of space. Can't just be Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, right? If we want everybody, and that area, that the space between is so important because it's full of myth and cosmology and other people's history, and we live on sacred land. That whole idea of disassociation and helping you to see that you are part of a bigger narrative.
I have a thought on that, and I'm so happy to see you, Caitlin, face to face, but never really have met. So once again, having this, a moment, right? I had this idea that in my Decentraland, I would have a stumble upon avatar where I didn't know who I was, but everybody else would reflect back to me who I was and how they behaved towards me. So I wouldn't know who I was. And in that same idea, I was in a human potential workshop years ago, and I had to stand on a chair and know to myself, everybody here in this room, we were going to stand in a line and tell me what they thought of me in just an hour of knowing me, right? But I'm committed to knowing what you're going to say about me. And the exercise is, after 75 people tell you a thing or two about you, first hold it together. And then after that, you're like, wow, nobody said what I thought they were going to say about me. No one. So what perceptual reality and existential crisis am I in right now? And that's the beginning of this overview effect of this ungodly, this sort of godliness of who are we and all that existential crisis. And I'm so excited to go there. I just ask the questions right now. I don't even know the answers, but I just, pull the feeling in and ask the question.
Well, I'll just piggyback off that. So that your question reminds me of an early piece I did called Human Art Object, where the idea was to explore the similarities and differences in that space. And so basically in the experience, you get to feel what it's like to be a work of art in an art gallery with patrons coming up and examining you.
I was like, which artist?
Sounds
or,
awful.
right? Yeah, examining you or not, right? Every person who comes in has a different approach, and I feel like that really sort of shifted your mindset, right? You're still yourself, but you're also not human at the same time, but you have human feelings about your experience. So that was just, I think it's a short experience, but really revelatory in experiencing what that feels like. And then there's a project beyond that I've been developing that plays with this idea of seeing yourself not as yourself, right? And what that does to you.
All day, every day.
Love it. So I think are we out of time? Do we have a couple more? Okay, so
Thank you.
we hopefully made a feeling that will become a memory. And thanks everybody. Come chat with us afterwards and follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.